These are my little call ducks, John and Fudge. That's John on the right and his son Fudge on the left. And I've had them quite a few years now. I started off with John and his wife Jean, and they had 4 ducklings, and then Jean sadly got taken by the fox, so John was a single dad for a while. Luckily the ducklings were big enough that they didn't need brooding, but I then sold one of the male ducklings and the 2 female ducks to somebody, and I kept Fudge so he could be a companion for John. So yeah, they just live as bachelors. They have to be in this enclosure at the moment because ducks have a really sort of rather rampant libido, and they end up sort of just chasing anything in feathers basically. So they do harass the chickens somewhat. So I have to keep them shut in this little enclosure during the day, but that's fine. I move it around and they can eat grass and splash around in their tub. And as you can see, there's a lot of feathers because they're molting at the moment, which is why they look a bit scrappy. But they'll soon have beautiful new feathers. They're known as calls because they were used as kind of live decoy ducks. The females particularly make a really loud quacking noise, loud sort of shout, and that used to attract ducks, wild ducks, to come in. So they used to sit the call ducks on a pond, and the females would call, and that would entice the wild ducks in for wildfowlers. So that's why they're called call ducks, but they're little miniature ducks. They're half the size of a regular duck, so they don't make quite the mess that big ducks do. Yeah, they're really cute. So this is the mallard colourway. There's quite a few call duck plumage colours, and this is, well, they're not particularly true to their type, but they're kind of basically mallard. But yeah, they look a bit grey and colourless at the moment because they're just molting out their main plumage. See, there's an awful lot of preening going on. So an update on Pedon. Surprisingly, she seems to have bonded with Ralph and his 2. Oh, she's going to chase the young uns. These 2 girls, Kiki and Cassandra, let's be honest, are not known for their inclusive and generous spirit, and I honestly thought they would just beat her up. She's not overly enamoured with Ralph. I don't know why. He's pretty handsome. He's certainly quite keen on her. Bit of courting behaviour there. But you know, she doesn't hate him. And these 2 seem to have accepted her. So I'm going to get on and make a sourdough pizza base. starter which I fed a little while ago. I'm using the Richard Burtonette recipe, which is 200 grams of starter, which is a little bit more than I'd normally use for a bread dough, but he's just basically using the basic white sourdough recipe. So I'll feed that in a minute, and then 350 grams. I'm obviously pouring this from the kettle, but it's not boiling. Then we need 500 grams of white flour, but as I did before with the baguettes, I'm going to put a spot of rye flour in as well, probably that much, which is about 75 grams. Then I'll top the rest up with strong white. So those are the flour and the starter and the water. I'm just going to do the salt on there. This is grey French sea salt. I need 10 grams of this. Yeah. Going to pop this in. Then I'm going to mix this for about 4 minutes on slow, so speed 1. Let's have about 4 minutes. I'm now going to turn it up to 3 or 4 for about 12 to 15 minutes until it's coming away from the side of the bowl. I'm going to shape the dough now. So with this, we need to get a kind of a top and a bottom on the dough. So I'm just going to use my scraper to stop it sticking too much. I don't want to use too much flour. So I'm just going to try and steer it towards the floury bit to the table. So I'm folding it in on itself in order to make a bottom for it. And then I'm going to, so this is now the top. And I'm going to keep pushing the flour, and basically I'm just working it round on the floury bit of the table. Doesn't matter if it sticks too much, a little bit more flour. And I'm going to do the shaping a few more times, and that's how we build up the structure of the dough. So making dough in a machine is very different from how I do it by hand. And I don't know if I prefer this. You get a much more sort of even textured dough, as you'd expect from kind of anything machine made. And it hasn't got quite the sort of mystery, I suppose, of making it by hand. But it is certainly, it needs a bit less sort of attention right at the start, because I do this shaping at kind of 45-minute intervals rather than the sort of 10-minute intervals to start with that you have to do if you're making it by hand. So I wouldn't say I prefer it, but it's definitely a good thing to know how to do it. And if you've got a KitchenAid or a Kenwood, KitchenAid or a Kenwood, I would certainly give sourdough in it a go. So I'm just going to flour my bowl and I'm going to pop this back to rest. While the dough's resting, I'm just going to put together a quick tomato sauce to go on top of the pizza. So I've got a couple of onions, a rather tired stick of celery, some garlic, a couple of tins of chopped tomatoes, some oregano and some thyme and olive oil. Here's the pizza base, which I just turned out of the KitchenAid bowl onto a floured surface and then just kind of shaped into a vague oblong, and I've put it now in the tin there. What I like to do underneath the pizza is to sprinkle a bit of oil, but also some polenta or semolina, which gives it a nice kind of crispy base and stops it sticking. So I'm going to leave this. I haven't kind of worked it too much, so you can see it's got some really big bubbles still. So I'm going to leave those in because that's quite a nice thing. That makes it kind of slightly focaccia-y kind of base. So I'm going to leave that just to do its thing for a bit. And the tomato sauce is ready. So I'm going to whiz that up with a blender, and then in a bit we'll put some of that on and top the pizza. Right, I've got my pizza here. It's puffed up quite a lot, which is good. I'm just going to put a little bit of olive oil on it and dimple it a bit just so that it holds the sauce a bit better. See the bubbles coming up there. I saw somebody do this on their Instagram once and had these huge bubbles, and I thought they were eggs. But anyway, never mind. So I'm just giving it a little poke. And then I will spoon on some sauce, which I've blended just enough to sort of take the big bits of celery and onion out of it. There we go. So on top, I've got a slightly peculiar mixture because I had a massive veg box order delivered today, and I've run out of space in the fridge. So this is kind of things I need to use up, which I'm putting on top of the pizza, but it's kind of pretty regular pizza kind of fare. So I've got some peppers, got some olives, got some mushrooms, got some buffalo mozzarella and some cheddar. there we go. The geraniums are always really popular with my honeybees, and I've got some really dark bees in my apiary, and there's another one. She's hardly got any orange on her at all, whereas this one here, you can see, that's just a variation. A queen bee, honeybee, will mate with about 20 different drones given the opportunity, and they all have varying characteristics, and so you get, depending on who their dad is, you either get very dark colourways or more orange. I have a range of plants in my garden. Most of them are self-seeded or things I've been given by friends and neighbours. I bought this Cirsium from a nursery near me last year, and you see it's doing really well, but you can also see it's absolutely covered in aphids. And you can also see, if I can zoom in, we've got ants running up and down tending the aphids. That's because they eat the sticky honeydew that the aphids produce, and so they effectively farm them, and they'll drive off predators, so they'll drive off the ladybirds who like to eat the aphids. So yeah, these ants are actually farming the aphids. You see it's absolutely covered in them. This is all the cheeping in the background. They're cross because they're not allowed out. This is a different group, so I don't tend to let them out, otherwise that cockerel will have a go at her, and that's something the chicks shouldn't really have to see. Anyway, just wanted to show you this hedge here, in there somewhere, is a great tit family. I've seen great tits going in and out, and I'm pretty sure the chicks have been fed on 90% aphids. So I like to leave the aphids because they make excellent bird food for fledglings. And if we get rid of all these, an ant, a bit cross with me for disturbing her farming, but if we get rid of all these, then there's nothing for the birds to feed their fledglings. Lots of us, including myself, spend a not insignificant amount on bird seed and bird food, but one could argue that actually we ought to be just providing more food, natural food for the birds, rather than buying bird seed which needs to be grown and shipped and packaged in plastic and driven around the countryside. So maybe being a little bit less prejudiced against, oh, there's a bumblebee, that's a white-tailed, look at the pollen sacs. Perhaps we should be a little less fastidious about getting rid of pests, and we can just encourage the birds to come in and pick them off for us. As you can see, they're still flowering, they're still producing nectar, they're still performing as flowers should, providing pollen and nectar for the bees and other pollinators. This is my compost heap, probably not the best subject, but I just want to show you. Now I let my bindweed just grow up and scramble all over the compost heap, which is probably absolute heresy to most people. But there's such beautiful flowers, and they just climb up and over, completely covering the side of the compost. Yep, sorry Karen, she's a bit cross with me, getting a bit close to her babies. But bees forage on these, you know, they're flowers. They have pollen, they have nectar. Not sure it really deserves the reputation that it has. Here's a combination of this red flower, which I can't for the life of me remember what it is. But this little yellow flower is actually just a weed, well, called a weed. But doesn't it look pretty? I've got some thistles here as well. They're just regular thistles, but I like them. They'll soon be flowering. Fantastic pollinated plants. Easy to grow, as you'd imagine. But I'm all for letting things grow where they want to grow. So this tangly mess, got some allium seed heads here, and a mallow. She's being visited by a honeybee there. I've got a whole load of Michaelmas daisies. These get covered in aphids as well. Meanwhile, the geraniums are being worked very hard by the honeybees. These tend to be more favoured by hoverflies. I don't often see honeybees on here. The carder bee. Just going into the... Oh, I can't remember what that is either. Flies tend to prefer the daisies because they have a kind of sticky pad to suck up the nectar, whereas bees have a proboscis, which is more like a needle. Whereas a fly can just walk about. There's a bee. Ooh. Not a honeybee, that's a solitary bee. Much smaller than a honeybee. I'm not very good at my species of solitary bee. They've got a very different habit. Often you can tell the difference in the bees, not just by what they look like, but also how they fly, where they're flying, when they're flying. Here I've got some fuchsia, and next door to it is some willow herb. Now I'm allowing the willow herb to grow up because it's a favourite food plant of the elephant hawk moth caterpillar, as is fuchsia. So I'm really hoping I might get some elephant hawk moths because I absolutely adore them. I have had them in the garden before because I've had to rescue them for the chickens. Oh look, here's a nursery web spider, brave green bottle above her. You can just about see behind the spider is a dark patch, and underneath is a pale sort of sac. So her babies are the dark mass above the leaf, and that pale, it's a bit like a net, is where they've hatched, and she's guarding them. Absolutely beautiful. I love how the bees clean their faces before they take off. They're actually making sure their antennae are clean, because that's how they smell effectively and sense their way. If you watch, they all come out and clean their face before they take off. I have two types of buttercup in my garden. I've got these, which are the meadow buttercup. They're kind of finer and more elegant. They have sort of more pointed leaves and a much taller habit and smaller seed heads. I'm not going to focus. The seed heads are a bit smaller. And again, the whole thing is just much daintier and more refined. The other one I have, go over here, oh there's one of my beautiful orchids. Just a common orchid, but exquisite nonetheless. The other type of buttercup I have is the creeping buttercup, which is altogether more brutish and has a seed head which looks disconcertingly like a coronavirus. But you can see it spreads with these runners, a bit like a strawberry, and the leaves are it's got much more leaf, and they tend to be a bit shorter in their habit. So I've got an awful lot of this as well, but I prefer the meadow buttercups. So that's it from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. I look forward to seeing you next time, where there'll be more chickens, a bit more baking, and some more things going on out in the garden. So I hope to see you then.